Hello, ladies, gentlemen, and deceased. It is I, EmmightySofia, and I'm going to be breaking down for you guys the mid-season finale of Season 5. We are on Episode 8, Coda. So, spoiler alert before we dive into the mad thick of things, as I will be bearing all in this review. And I must also add that I am currently using a brand new camera, so I apologize if there's anything weird about the lighting or camera orientation or the audio. I am still in the process of experimenting with all that business, but I thought, hey, what better time to break this bad boy in than when I'm talking about a really friggin' depressing episode of television. So we are doing it now, live, for real. So let us get into the thick of things. And yeah, that was not exactly a stroll through the roses, as it were. You know, I'm sure that a lot of you who have stuck around for my previous Walking Dead vlogs, who saw how I reacted to such events as the death of Herschel, a lot of you are probably surprised that I am not currently hewing the trees of a forest to supply my tissues. And well, my reaction to Beth's death was, I guess it's more that state of shock than the visceral, oh, here come the waterworks experience. It happened so quickly. And so not in the way that I expected. I mean, I knew that it was going to be a coin toss between Beth and Carol, because we know what happens to really well-developed characters in the show. It puts their lives on the line, as is the case with Herschel, what we saw in the past season. The last season when he was with us was that he had all of these incredible moments to interact with other characters, to impart wisdom, to show how the group has grown, and to just demonstrate all these really cool, crazy things, and then kabam, he got taken out in an extremely visceral and violent fashion. And so I had no idea how things were going to go down, and I think that the end of this episode was really fascinating, because I was anticipating that it was going to be like the last 5 minutes of the episode, because there was all this tension, all this build, and then we've got the standoff. Rick's group is on one side of the hallway, Dawn's group is on the other side, and then they're going to make the trade, but something goes horribly wrong. And that it did, but it didn't all go down in a crazy blaze of glory and bullets. I mean, it was quite different in that respect. And I'm still trying to break down in my mind what exactly it was that Beth ended up sacrificing herself for in the scene. And I think that there's a lot of different ways to interpret what happened, and I didn't actually get to watch the Talking Dead, so you guys might have to fill in the blanks as far as what Emily Kinney thinks about Beth's choice. But I think that ultimately when she came up to Dawn, who just stated that they needed to hand Noah over or there was going to be no deal, period, when Beth approaches her after, while she locks eyes with Dawn while she's embracing Noah, and she gets this look in her eye, and you know that Kitty's gonna sink in some claws. And we also know that in her cast she hid a little scissors, kind of like Joel from The Last of Us, you know, keeping those kinds of things handy for just in case the occasion arises. She locks eyes, and then when she walks up to Dawn and she says, you know, like, I think I understand now. My interpretation of what Beth feels that she understands is the kind of person that Dawn is, because we've seen this constant tension throughout this episode and the previous episode, in which Dawn and Beth kind of interacted and turned into this team, that Beth can't decide if Dawn really does deep down want to help other people, or if she is as much a part of this system in which people use and manipulate other people as the cops who are raping and abusing, whom Dawn pretty much lets run wild to some extent so she can keep her place in this hierarchy, in this institution. And she sees in that last moment where everything could have gone so smoothly, where everything was fair, that Dawn's priority was perpetuating the system of abuse, and that Beth's going free meant that Noah had to go back into this life of essentially slavery, you know? And so I think that was the breaking point for Beth, and things went really quickly there, and I'm sure that we could break down things in any number of ways. But in that moment, it was the jaw drop. I mean, I felt my chin hit the cement before I even fully knew what had happened. And then I was attempting to collect oxygen for the inevitably ridiculously painful moment when Maggie and everybody else shows up. And of course, Maggie just finds out that her sister is still alive. And now, I need to say, because a lot of people have been complaining about this for a while, and I've said it before, I'm going to say it again, the reason why Maggie was never asking about Beth is because, quite honestly, that's not going to help her survive, to sit and wonder and think, oh, what happened, what happened, what happened? Maggie is a full-blown survivalist as much as anybody else at this point, and she needs to focus on the people who she has around her. Focus on her group, who's alive, who she can protect. I mean, you have to some extent, get really pragmatic in these matters, and that's part of why I think she's survived as long as she has. And so, yes, I think that she carries a lot of pain with her, and she was separated from Beth the day that they lost Herschel. So it's like, you guys, you can't blame the woman for the way that she's grieving and dealing with loss. Like, I mean, sure, maybe you could say, hey, writers, you should have actually, like, sprinkled Maggie's existence with an acknowledgement of Beth and missing her and whatever else. But just, let the girl do what she needs to do. Anyway, so I think what was most painful for me was seeing how Daryl and Maggie had to react to the loss of Beth. And then we even saw this really tender moment where Rick, who is he has been flexing some fearsome sides of his personality in this episode, we see him gently take Beth by the head, and kind of, it was such a sweet paternal moment between them as soon as Beth came back into the group. And then to have to lose her after that, it was a weird death. It was a weird death because I felt worse about the characters who felt bad for losing her than actually losing Beth. And that's not because I wasn't invested in her character. It's just that I had sensed for a really long time that it was going to be either her or Carol. And yeah, so there was some part of my mind that I think was prepared for that, and I definitely teared up, but it was a very, very different kind of moment. And it was almost like I was sitting in my seat trying to hold my breath so that nobody else would start a shooting frenzy after the death of Beth and Dawn. And it was weirdly peaceful how after the two of them kind of canceled each other out, these two groups are in a place of, holy crap, that just happened. The cops of Grady are like, okay, this is where it ends. She was the one who needed to go. Let's raise our hands and walk away from this. Whereas Rick's side is fraught with emotion because they went through this entire crazy process to try to get back two of their own, two people who have become family and community to them. And so the loss is very different, and we see in a split second that it could totally go one way or the other. That Daryl, who is blubbering and the tears are fresh in his eyes, and it could be very easy for them to simply lash out and go ham, kind of like what Rick did at the beginning of the episode with Lamson or whatever his name was, but unnecessarily inflicting violence as far as dealing with their opponents, trying to get their people back. But then they realize, both sides, that they need to move on in their own ways. And so that was kind of a sigh of relief, because we have seen a lot of things hit the fan this season so far and in seasons past. I mean, we think about the premiere episode of the 5th season, and that was definitely, like, it kind of felt like the polar opposite of what we got in this episode. And so Rick decides that, you know, they can't stake a claim here in this place at Grady, because inevitably they would probably get sucked into this system, or whatever form of it is going to continue on now that Dawn is gone. And they trust the open road more than they do anything else. And so they're going for it. And I have to say that I love the cinematography of that final scene where we see this super wide shot. The group is all outside. You know, Abraham and everybody else has showed up, and they're immediately mourning Beth, and there's the broken, bleak skyline of Atlanta looming above them, and now the question is, where do they go? What's next? And we also have Morgan kind of in the future picture as well, and holy freaking crap, the static in the air, I am going to massacre. But anyways, so how did you guys feel about the way that everything went down? Because I definitely didn't react the way that I thought I was going to. Everybody is like, you know, brace yourself and get the tissues, grab the Depends, and that's usually the way that I approach these mid-season finales and finales in general when it comes to this show. But I'm in kind of this weird state where I don't know what to think or feel, because in a lot of ways it feels like Dawn and Beth kind of canceled each other out. And there's this weird sense of balance, and it freaking sucks. I really wanted to see what the group would be like with Beth back around and to get to hear her sing again, but she grew exponentially this season, and unfortunately, I mean, it's so sad that she in her final moments sacrificed herself as in opposition to this kind of society, to this side of humanity that manipulates and abuses and uses, and that's where we have to leave her off on. But she takes a stand for that, and that is extremely powerful, I think. A lot of people are criticizing the Grady Memorial arc, which the conclusion of which is what the name of the episode is drawn from, the Coda, because this is the end of an arc. This is an end of a piece of the story, and then we're going to go on from here. But a lot of people are criticizing it because, and I would agree, we didn't really get to connect with any of the cop characters at Grady. None of them were really in the shades of gray as far as moral ambiguous goes. They were literally good cops and bad cops. And that just kind of felt like oversimplifying to me. I mean, I don't know if that's the way that things were expressed in the comics, and I understand that there would not have been time for us to really get into these characters' heads, but they all kind of felt like carbon copies of each other. So there were certain aspects of the Grady Memorial plot that were hard to become emotionally invested in. Not to mention, I was surprised that they didn't show on screen the reunion of Carol and Beth. That was actually excluded entirely. And perhaps that was something that was edited out, maybe to make more room for the final hallway game of Red Rover that we got. But that was really kind of disappointing to me too, not getting to see how Carol reacted to seeing Beth, and I think that would have been powerful, and that's something that we expected. But so that time cut kind of changed the mood a little bit for me, but there was a lot of really interesting things that happened in this episode. It's crazy to see the metamorphosis and the evolution of Rick Grimes, and how he's, ironically enough, sort of back in his position as a sheriff of King County. And he's in the cop car, and he's radioing the guy that he's pursuing at the very beginning, and you know, so it's all kind of wild to see how far he has come. And then the disdain that he shows for the guy when he finally smacks him to the ground with his car, and he gets out and he's like, dude, where'd you think you were going? And he just kind of lingers on that, plants the bullet, and then concludes that little meetup with "Shut up." That is definitely quite a change of pace for this character. You know, we go from seeing him at the mid-season finale of season 4, where he's like, you know, we're not too far gone. And I think that he's tired of being taken advantage of by people, just as Beth is with everything that she saw go down at Grady. And he's like, you know what? It's just not worth it. But now people are starting to ask the question, if Rick had simply taken Lamson back in and they had 3 cops to trade, would everything that went down with Beth and Dawn have actually occurred? Because it was until Dawn said that she wanted Noah that everything seemed to be going pretty swimmingly. And so now I was like trying to break it down with my brother. We watched the episode together and I was like, okay, how might things have gone down? But the thing that we need to consider is that in losing Beth, Dawn wanted someone to serve as her ward again, to keep her position of power, to keep things the same, and to create the kind of balance that she wanted. And so would having another cop for Noah have actually played out? Because if they didn't have any other spare wards and nobody was, you know, willing to yield theirs to Dawn or whatever, would somebody have gotten demoted and put in the position of ward to Dawn? That might have resulted in a far more violent showdown than what we actually saw with Dawn and Beth. So the question is Rick, how responsible is Rick for what happened? I mean, I think that when he was initiating the 2-for-2 deal, he was doing so in a very professional and powerful way, and I think with the correct demeanor and attitude, and, you know, he carried himself the way he needed to, all that good jazz. But what if they had had 3? Or what if Noah hadn't have been there? But at the same time, he did reveal that Noah was with them. Should he have done that? All these little questions that, at the same time, in the grand scheme of things, they don't really matter, because what happened happened, and we need to contend with the information and the events that we have, because, you know, that's just really all we can do. That's all that my brain and my soul can handle. So I'm just gonna leave it there. But these were the questions that I was asking, and they might be stupid, but maybe you're asking them too, and we could be stupid together. That would make me feel pretty dandy, I guess. But yeah, so clearly Rick has transformed over the years, and not just in terms of his busheliness in the face department. And I still love him as a character. He has got a serious freaking swagger that, I mean, it just don't quit. I respect the guy. I respect the guy. I love the guy. I don't necessarily stand up for everything he's done, and we see that there's a little bit of a rift between Daryl and Rick regarding how to deal with these people that they're confronting, but at the same time, I just love Rick. I just do. He's my man. We also got to see Michonne finally kick into action with her katana. That was really quite satisfying on many levels, so that was good. Good to have that in the mix. The church has been shut down, and of course Father Gabriel had to lead the entire Walker horde from the school back to the church where there is a child and baby. But it all ended up working out in the end-ish. And Morgan actually finds the church later, and he goes to the altar, and he has a moment. That was a really interesting scene too, and in that same scene we see him find the map to Washington DC and Abraham's note about the world needing a new Rick Grimes. So that also opens up the question of what Morgan is going to do and whether he is going to find the group or what he's all about. I'd love to hear your thoughts about that in the comments. But anyways, going back to Father Gabriel and all that jazz, it was very interesting to see him in the exact same position that he had put his parishioners in back at the start of the apocalypse. He found himself on the outside of those doors, surrounded by walkers, surrounded by death, just as the people who he had refused to help had been. So, you know, brings things full circle, and I really hope that pushes him into a new era of life where he's actually willing to attempt to survive as one must and be of some use to this world. Because for all the wisdom and heart and grace that are within him as a Christian man, a holy man, a preach, one delivering the word of God, like, that, none of that's even going to be able to get anywhere if he just kind of tries to hole up, burrow into a little tunnel and exist, and that's just not gonna work anymore. And now he knows what it feels like to be on the outside, to be the one vulnerable. So I hope that if he's going to be around in the future, I want to see him really emerge as a powerful fighter, because he's definitely gotten schooled in that department by now, and if he hasn't, then screw that guy, because we don't have time for that. We just don't. So he escapes with Michonne and Judith and Carl. And then Abraham and gang show up in style at the doorstep, destroying the doorstep. That's pretty much the way to go. They see that things have gone drastically downhill, and they find out where everybody else is, and then they show up. So we're gonna pick up with the group now back together. That's kind of the pattern that this show has started to follow, is the breaking of the group, the coming back together of the group, and then all the things that change in between, the things they experience, the other groups that they come into contact with, and all that fun jazz. So in a sense, this episode kind of brought everything all the way around in terms of that rhythm. So group is back together. But what kind of peril is this going to mean? And how frustrated are they going to become at not having a roof over their heads? Because they know that they can't have that, but at the same time, well, it's going to get a little bit tiresome having to fend for their own at every corner and not have an explicit goal to work for, like as was the idea when they believed that Eugene had the cure, and that was in Washington. And now they go on to do something and to live and survive and thrive and all of the above. Let's see, as far as other things going down in the episode, we got to kind of see Tyrese play Obi-Wan Kenobi to Sasha and trying to speak wisdom into her life and, you know, tell her to use the Force and all that good jazz. I really hope that Daryl and Carol bond together and are there for one another in the midst of this loss that they just experienced. And oh man, the well of emotion that is Miss Maggie Green. Lauren Cohen never ceases to amaze me with how brilliantly emotional her performances get. That was what really kicked me in the freaking pants after everything went down. Yeah, so honestly, I have no idea just where things are going to go yet. I'm not caught up in the comics, so if they are intent on following the comics, I have really no insights as to what that could possibly mean for what's happening in the show, but I would love to hear all of your thoughts. I want to thank all of you for sticking with me for this season. It has been a pleasure. Gotham is also done, so I need a new show to review. I know Gotham will be back in January, Better Call Saul in February, all kinds of stuff on the horizon, but at the same time, leave your suggestions. I'll try and do some film reviews as well. And yeah, so a very different kind of mid-season finale. Just very, very fascinating way to lose a character to see what Beth was standing up for. I mean, how do you guys feel about how it went down? Was it satisfying to you? Was it dissatisfying? I want to hear all of it. So bring it to the comments. I will be there. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that my camera did a good job with the recording business, and I will indeed be back before you know it.